like that compassion, I guess it has a blurred line for them. And so, how do you kind of navigate that role as a leader and being compassionate, but also kind of being that firm and getting your way or getting people to have that buy in?
So let's be clear. And this is what I try to have a discussion with people about. Somewhere down the lines, people thought that compassion meant soft. That's not what it means. It is some of the hardest work in the world to actually still love people while they are doing things that are not the best things, right? So to be mindful of, you can't control how someone else responds to some of the dialogue that you do or some of the decisions that you make. But what I do say is, in your space of leadership, if you make your decisions transparent about why you made certain decisions, that's a different kind of conversation, right? Like because there are people that will always take, like the phrase taking kindness for weakness it's been around for a long time on purpose, right? But the truth is, when have you ever felt bad about being kind to someone else or for someone else? When has it ever really impacted you in a bad way to stand up for people and do the right thing for someone in the right moment? Just because someone else can translate that in ways, that really has absolutely nothing to do with you, because realistically, you can't control what other people do with the actions that you have. All you can do is be clear about your intent. There was something else that I read up there. So someone said, how can I help our students acquire what they need is what you wanted from here. Leading with the goal of serving others. Our voice at the table is not just our own, but those that we serve. So a lot of those things are critical in any space of leadership, right? Like we do a lot of work with, it's funny, people like to say emerging leaders, but what I say is, once you stand up in ratio with kids, you are now a leader. No matter what anyone else would like to say or think, you are now in that position because young people are looking up to you. Now, when you get in a place though, oh, sorry, girl. But when you get in a place where young people, or where you are now leading adults, that's a different level of conversation. And the truth is, people don't have to let you lead them. It's how have you built enough level of community where they are willing to follow you because they trust where you're going to lead them, right? So I think that's a different kind of conversation that you get to have about leadership. And you guys, I am trying to give Bro some access to something really quickly so that she can share a bit of a slide deck with you all. And we can walk through some things. Hold on, Bro. For whatever reason, my internet is acting a little funny. It's probably because I'm in a room where I wasn't supposed to be. All right. You should have gotten it, girl. So, and what I'm going to do, you guys, is I'm going to make sure that you have access to this. Girl, let's share the deck. And let's go to slide number 13. No, let's go deeper. Let's go to slide 17. Can you get it yet? Okay. So this, the slide that we're going to do is going to show you all a little bit about how I think about my own kind of leadership stance in a space, right? And if you notice it, and I'm going to go back through some other parts of the slide, but it's just because we've missed a lot of time, I want to kind of catch you up to the conversation, is that, remember when I said that servant leadership is one type of leadership? There are multiple ways that you can show up and be a leader in space. The concept of servant leadership means that you are always leading through and speaking through the people that you serve, right? And that is critical. For me, though, I looked at it more as there's more things at play than just the people I serve. It's the context in which I serve them. It's the battles that I need to fight on their behalf and or with them. And so for me, my leadership style is these kind of three intersections of places. And so it's and what I'm going to talk about is kind of the pros and cons of, for me, of how I've learned to kind of stand in the space this way. So let's try it again. Participative leaders prioritize the involvement of the group in the decision-making process. Within an organization, those leaders ensure that they are approachable and do not follow rigid hierarchies. They ensure that their team members are free to give in their input. And not just that, those leaders ensure that the valuable feedback that they are given is catered to at every step of the decision-making process. A lot of times as a leader, you will ask your team for their opinions and then you don't do anything with it. That's not how this level of leadership works. It also means with this kind of intersectionality of leadership traits, I also believe that there's core kind of skill sets that need to be activated for that work. That's attentiveness, communication, creativity, emotional intelligence, which is really critical. And that goes back to the point that you were making, Marcel, about being a Black man in this space. Being able to regulate yourself so that others understand how they cannot take you out of yourself to be in a space is really critical. And that's some of the work that we do the least amount of when it comes to adults in this work. And what's so funny about that is that directly is in opposition of the fact that we try to do SEL work with young people, right? Like one of the things that we say is, how are you going to hold young people accountable to work that you haven't done for yourself? So in the spaces with them, how are you modeling the level of expectation or the types of behaviors or just the ability to process through situations and information in ways that honor not only the person that you are, but the people that you're actually in relationship or conversation with. Other traits of the kind of facilitative and strategic person is this idea around fairness and being able to observe before like making decisions and giving input to things, like really paying attention to not just the actions of others that you are trying to lead, but the context of those actions. Lastly, for me, it's the transformational leader. And that's the person that really wants to create change with the status quo, and this takes precedence over everything else. A lot of the work that I do is trying to get a system that I feel like has failed children, especially Black and Brown and Indigenous children, for longer than decades. And that there is an actual sense of urgency with us changing the system in which we sit. But that also means that to just disrupt the system without building another one that works better for us would do most harm to the people that I'm fighting the hardest for, because they would be the ones that fall through the cracks. So how, as a leader, do you really kind of move through this work? By building more bridges, being in better relationship with others, and especially people that don't see the world just like you. The more you can build relationships across bridges, the more of a webbing that we actually create that catches more young people as we build new things. So things that I think are important. Go to slide. Let's do 14. So this is something that I ask people to do as a strategy to start to identify, well, what is your leadership style? Like, because this workshop was about servant leadership, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily yours. It may sound good, it may feel good, but we also have like our natural inclination about how we show up in spaces and how we move in the world. So given that, I ask people to answer these questions. Do I value goals more than relationships? And y'all, I want to say this clearly. It doesn't mean that there's a right or a wrong answer to this. This is just, think about it like your natural habits. Like if you were doing a project, what's the most important thing? Like getting the task done or being in relationship with the people that you're doing the task with? Like which one just feels like the way that you naturally gravitate? Um, I want everybody to take a moment to answer these questions. You don't have to share them with anybody else, but just on your own, answer these 5. I'm gonna give y'all a couple of seconds. And let's see. And when you're done, try to give me a thumbs up so I can tell. All right. Thanks, everybody. Okay, girl, go to the next slide. And so what I'm going to do, you all, for folks, I wanted you to start off with thinking about those things because those kind of core questions will help you figure out like your natural habituation is what we call it. But I'm going to put a link in the app after this is over with for you all to take an actual quiz to help you determine your own leadership style. But I do want to go to, let's see, something else that I think I want you to think about when framing out your leadership piece. Um, the question on the screen now that says like, why is it important for you to even identify what your leadership style is because the more you are aware of how you show up in spaces, and especially as a leader, the more you will understand how you should move to support your teams. And this is in any situation. I don't care if it's your team that's working in your after school program. I don't care if it's a teacher and you're working with an instructional assistant in your classroom. I don't care if you're a coach and you're facilitating a team, right? It's whatever space that you have relational work with people, the more you are aware of how you show up, the more you can navigate everyone else that comes into that space. It also means that you have the ability to shift your styles. So you notice how I started this conversation with showing how my leadership style is a combination of quite a few different ones. That really speaks to the fact that I use different skills with different groups and teams that I'm working with. But I have to start by being really clear about how I am showing up in the rooms with those people. It also allows me to be able to kind of really reflect and look at not just how I'm showing up in a space, but how my actions could have caused things. Like one of the most important parts, I believe, of a leader is to be able to say when they were wrong and not just acknowledge when they were wrong, but to be able to change their behavior so that they don't cause that same kind of harm again. Um, it helps you identify issues and challenges with your style so that you understand how to better serve the team that you're with. Like if you're a leader and nobody listens to you, are you really their leader? And sometimes that is just a very simple question to ask. If you have a team and it feels like you're saying things to them and it's not really landing and they're not really paying attention, then you have to really look at, well, what am I really bringing into this group if they don't trust me enough to listen to me? Like I said, the part about it helps you like figure out when and how to make amends. Like with the work of expanded learning right now, we know that the people in our field are so overworked. Y'all are working in conditions that are just ones we've never experienced before because young people are showing up in our spaces in ways that they haven't before. And one of the things that we hope that people are doing is showing each other a lot of grace as we figure out how to best serve our young people. But one of the things that we notice is that people say stuff like, oh yeah, we're gonna show people grace, and I'm gonna let my people do mindfulness. And I'm like, but you let them do mindfulness and then add more stuff on their plate. How much grace is that? Right? Like, that's the sign of a really good leader who says, you know what, I know we want to try this new thing, but I need to take something off of my people's plate so that they actually have the space and the time and the mental acumen to actually do any or some of those things. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that I just talked about, y'all, is really kind of giving framing for some of the discussion around leadership. I think I want to go back to like some specific kind of questions that it felt like people had at the beginning. Marcel, do you mind coming on the mic again?
Yeah, I got you. What's up?
All right. So you said that sometimes there are like specific issues and you're trying to figure out how to solve those. Why don't you give us an example and we walk through some strategies on how you can handle something.
Okay. Well, and some of it I've actually learned as well. They haven't experienced certain things, or
For sure.
they didn't learn certain things. So basically, one of the issues I was having at first was buy-in for our Black History performance. I was trying to explain to them like a theme, so we can have like a common theme, so everyone can kind of focus on what they're gonna teach their students, so that way we can be able to showcase to our parents and families for one of the first times since our campus is a closed campus and we haven't had parents on campus before. And so in realizing this information, as they were struggling trying to understand the theme and trying to understand what to do with their students, I realized, I'm like, oh wow, this campus has been closed for so long because of the pandemic that this staff never had an experience doing a showcase with their students and to showcase to families. And so they have no idea what to do. They've been so student centered to where they're doing like carnivals and stuff like that for the students, but not in a sense of having students showcase what they have learned in terms of like an exhibit or things like that. And so some of those things I was able to learn, but it was still kind of difficult to kind of shift their thinking from oh, I can't do this to oh, I can do this a mind frame. And so that was a struggle for like the first couple of weeks of them grasping of what they could do and their limitations and things like that. It was a lot of saying, "Oh, kinder can't do this. First graders can't do this." When I'm like, my experience in my years of experience, yes, they can. And I'm like, all you need to do is help guide them in the right way. Yes, it's a little bit more prep than it is with the fifth graders, but it's still something where you can still get something done. They can get on stage, they can present things like that, and it's still a cute performance for them and an experience that will last a lifetime. And so it's just those little things where, like I see number three, it says it allows you to conduct thorough reflection to look at all sides. After like our meetings, I was able to reflect, like, oh wow, this is what's happening. And so I was able to devise different ways to identify like some of those challenges and figure out how can I show up for them in ways that they can feel like, all right, I am more empowered. And so our performance is actually tomorrow. So I'll see y'all when I get to Fresno late. But it'll be an exciting Black History performance. I can't wait to see and excited for my staff and students.
Well, and what I would love, Marcel, too, right, is, and so, okay, A, we got a drink for you when you get here. But B, um, when you get a chance, like
Thank
when you
you.
get back next week, to really talk to your team and see. So even though they were really nervous about it, right? And the fact that you were like, no, 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 this is something that can be done. It takes a little effort, it takes more work, but to really talk to them like after this performance to see like how proud parents are when they get to come and see their kids at program, right? All of that stuff. I'd love
I
for you to
already
have
have
a
the order questions ready. I already have the order
that's what I'm
questions
talking
ready.
about.
So don't even
Marcel
worry.
just said
Diego
he
already
already
prepped
has
me
the ORAS
good.
questions ready for his staff when he gets back. That's fantastic. Because I think that's going to be one of the best parts of their learning, right? After it's over with, to be able to process this. Yeah, we were really nervous about it, but the fact that they actually did it and what it meant to not just the kids, but to the families and that greater community, and the fact that you are building community just by those kinds of activities, right? That's going to be fantastic. Anybody else?
Thank
Since you
you for
got on here.
that, Miss Tiffany.
Oh, of course, of course, of course. Um, Anybody else? Something that you actually, like, now that you got us on here, a question that you actually had before I start talking a little bit about scarcity mindset and some other things. Like, did you have a leadership challenge that you are kind of struggling with? Or do you even see yourself as a leader in your spaces? Oh, Emily, what he said is it's called an ORID, and it's a facilitation strategy. And so it's basically, how do you get input from people on a very specific kind of topic? And it's just a structure that you have. And because Marcel is involved in a couple of other leadership strategies and programs, he is really familiar with that. But what I will
Thank you.
do,
Yeah.
of course, I know who you are. I will, but I will link in the slide deck that I have, I will link an overview of the ORID so that you all can at least see what it is. How do you draw the line from friend to manager, wanting to be kind but respected and listened to, but sympathetic as well? How do you define those boundaries? Well, there's a couple of things. For some reason, people feel like boundaries are a bad thing to have. You need to have boundaries with everybody. And one of the hardest transitions that I've seen in our field is when staff transition, like, let's say that you were direct service staff with folks and then you get promoted. And now all of a sudden you're actually the leader in the space, and people still want to engage with you like you're their peer. And that's usually a really hard kind of transition for folks to make. The easiest way, and let me say, I was hired on as a previous leader, was moving after 20 years. Oh, so you still got, you still have all the residual, oh, we loved them, oh, they're the best thing going, and you're supposed to kind of replace that. Is that part of it, or am I just making up stuff, Tania? Sometimes it seems. Okay. So I guess my first step is always, and this is just what I believe to be true, and I'm not saying, let me preface this first. These things don't change overnight. Relationships are built through truth. So the more that you engage with your team honestly and let them know upfront what the expectation is, but not just what the expectation is, but how you are willing to support them to meet that expectation, you tend to do a better job of getting them on your side, because then they start to figure out how this person is going to support you versus how the last person may have. Now, a thing that you can do is a really transparent conversation with the team to ask them, well, what were the best things that they experienced with their last leadership, right? What were the things that they felt were really strong and that felt really supportive to them? Don't ask them things like, oh, why did you like this person? Because that's about feelings. What you're trying to figure out and identify is, how do I support you all in this work to be the best that you can possibly be for our young people every day that we support? So really honest, really transparent conversations to begin with, really clear expectations, but expectations that align with how you will support people to meet those expectations. One of the biggest drawbacks that happen for new leaders coming into a space is that, and I'm going to say this is my challenge as well, is that I tend to assume that people know certain things or have always done things a way that made sense to me. Coming into new places, you really start to see that that's not accurate at all. And so sometimes what you have to do is humble yourself to say, what are some of the best and promising practices that were already existing in this space when I got here? And really honor those and allow those people to do those things. but then also say to them, and as much as I'm going to honor and respect the things that you all do well, I'm also coming with a wealth of knowledge from other places as well, and I'm willing to share those too. Now, when it comes to the having a sympathetic ear for folks and showing a level of empathy for your team, I think, like I said, all of that comes with real candor. Like, a lot of people assume that when you do something for people, that people understand why you're doing it, right? Because in a lot of our exchanges with people, I try to tell people sometimes you have to accept gifts in the spirit in which they're given, not as if you would have given them. So when you're doing things for your team, to try to really set like really clear boundaries and create different expectations, it really is being transparent about saying, you all, there's something else that we're going to have to add into how we do X, Y, and Z. And we're doing that because children will be safer if we do this, or it's going to make work easier for us on the back end. You know how it takes us 45 minutes to do this? If we make this kind of change, it's only going to take us 30 minutes. That gives you all 15 minutes back to do whatever that may be. But you have to show people the thinking behind the decisions that you're making, because that is what helps them understand, oh, this person isn't just telling me to do something because they want me to do something. It's like, no, there's a real rationale behind it. And as the leader in the space, making sure that the decisions you make benefit everybody, that there's a win for the team in some of those decisions, as well as working with individual people to kind of meet them where they are, to give them what they need. Because it's rare, thinking about expanded learning staff in general, it's rare that every person on a team comes with the same skill set, right? Or has the same level of expertise, or like not everybody on, and I'm just thinking about a program that I ran, not all of my team had the best classroom management, right? Like I had two that could beast out. They could manage any group of kids doing anything. And then I had a couple that, they struggled with that. And so what I learned to do initially was I helped them first by not putting all of the most challenging kids in their groups. But then I started helping them like once a week. I would go into their classrooms and model the expectations that I had and how I wanted them to move. And then I'd let them practice that with me in the room so I could correct them in the moment so they could see the difference between what they were doing versus what I wanted them to do, right? So there's lots of layered strategies that you can do to help define the boundaries. But as long as the boundaries are defined through working with people to get better and not just telling them what to do, you have a better chance of some of that stuff sticking. Tania, did that help? Or is there something, or you have a deeper question that you want me to say more about? Very much? Okay. Anybody else? A question into the space? How do you help staff? Wait, there's one more. How do you help staff that feel they are contributing a lot, but they really aren't? Okay, Sosa, you're gonna have to give me a little bit more.
So staff that feels like they're doing a lot in their capacity, but really are not. So in their mind, they believe that they're really like delivering more than they really are in actuality.
Well, so I guess the question would be, if they think they're delivering a lot and you think they aren't, where is it that defines what a lot is or not enough, right? Like one of the things that we say in our own teamwork is that you have to calibrate everybody's lens so that when we see something, we are looking at the same thing and we're looking for the same thing. So like if you have a team and they feel like, look, I come in, I do these three things, and these are the only three things I've ever been asked to do, so I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, that is how they're going to continue to move. But if you're saying, no, those are the three things, but there are 7 others that you all have never made a dent in, and now we need to talk about as a team what they are, that is the work of the leader, to be able to sit down with them and talk about the difference in what they're doing versus what the expectation is. But you can't just say things like, I really need y'all to do more. What you need to say, and this is the same way with correcting behavior in young people, what you need to be able to say is, here's something that I'm noticing, y'all. When we come in, we do this, and we do this. And when we do those things, the young people respond and do this. There are 2 or 3 more things that we need to add to elevate how our young people are responding in the spaces. And so let's figure out what they are. You can come in with suggestions, but if you really want the team to buy in and actually do them, you need to kind of massage those things together. I could probably be a little bit more specific if you gave me a more specific example, but I really think that's usually the critical part of it. Staff has to understand and know the expectation. I saw you coming off mute. Come on up.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm good actually. That's perfect. Thank you for sharing that. That changed my perspective a little bit. I like the changing the lens part, because I think that's very key. I think I never thought about it in that manner, so that definitely helps. I think that is you definitely hit the nail on the head when it comes to that. It broadened my perspective for sure. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm glad I can help y'all. So y'all should know that I'm one of the old heads on the team. So I have a run program. I was a classroom teacher. I was a counselor. I did a bunch of stuff. But the truth is, expanded learning is the place where I feel like not only our young people can grow the most in our current educational system, but I also feel like expanded learning is the place where our staff that haven't always had really good experiences and expectations of schools also are learning too. So, and especially if any of you are site coordinators, you probably have staff that are young and they are trying to figure this out. But the truth is, some of them may not have learned how to learn because the school system wasn't successful for them. So a lot of you are doing that work with them in parallel to them also learning for young people. So yeah, it's a big lift. Anybody else? Something specific? And hey, Hector, I didn't see you on here. And Brazil, is that you? And Nadra, hey, okay, wait a minute. When did y'all get on this call? I'm seeing all kind of people on here that I didn't know were on this call.
Some people trickled in, Tiffany. I think they heard you were here, and so they all started coming.
I doubt that. Everybody looking for the other person, and I just happened to jump in the whole space, y'all, just for the record. Okay, so let's go to grow kind of how I set up this conversation, if this really would have been my workshop. Go to slide 9. So hold on one sec. Okay, so go, wait, why is that showing? Go back one more to the 3-legged stool, girl. Okay, so things to think about, you all, as you build out your skill set as a leader. There are 3 things that are always at play as you stand in the leadership space. It is the personal, it is the relational, and it's the systemic. And so what that really means, and we call this the 3-legged stool because it's really all those things in balance, but what it really frames out as is who you are as a person shows up as you lead and how you lead. In that work, we always say this is the personal mastery. This is where, for those of you that understand the kind of SEL competencies, this is where you start looking at your self-awareness and your self-management. This holds true to adults and young people alike. So let's be clear about that. But in terms of defining a leadership kind of stance, you have to identify what is important to you, what is meaningful for you, how do you really see and view the world, and how do you want the world to see and view you? And then after you do that, and then how do you choose to be in relationship with others? How do you hold true to the way that you talk to people, the things that you talk to people about, the way that you actually build relationships with others? Everyone likes to think that leadership is all about telling people what to do. Man, if that's the only skill you got, you won't be leading for long. The truth about it is, the more you are in relationship with the people that you are leading, the more you will understand that your job as the leader is to remove the obstacles that prevent them from being able to show up to the best of their ability. Because the more your team is able to show up, the better the work is, the more young people are impacted, and the easier it gets, because many hands make light work. And if you think and hold your personal, which is how you show up, the relational, how do you build relationships across this team? And then the last part is an understanding the complexity of the system in which that team exists. This is a very layered part of this conversation. In reality, we all sit in different systems all the time. And a system is simply just, what's the unit that I am trying to be a part of, right? So, for example, we all have our family. That's the first system that we're a part of. And initially, it's your parents or guardians, or however that family structure has. And then there's the family that you choose, which could be a partner, it could be your friend group, but all of those things. Then the next one is, where do you choose to work? That's another system that you're a part of. So in thinking about this in relationship to like expanded learning and after school programs and before school programs and intersession and summer, oh, I'm tired of saying all that, that the triangle of those three are always at play. Think about how you have certain staff that the way to motivate them is really through care, right? You need to show up for them. They need to be told what a good job they're doing. There are other staff who are like, yeah, that's not what motivates me. I need to be challenged. I want you to look at my work and say, well, this was really good, but I know that you could do better, right? Like being able to understand that ability to build those relationships, but so that the team dynamic actually makes sense, right? So if you think about those three things always at play, to me, the focus of the kind of what this workshop was, what he was initially going to talk about with the whole servant leadership piece, is you have to do the exploration of your personal first to even understand what kind of leader you're going to be. You can go to the next slide, Grow. And the thing that I like to say to folks that I think makes it make more sense is there's this idea about, I'm so sorry, girl, they are sending you messages and I'm asking you to change slides. There's just a lot going on, y'all. That there's this conversation about how we think about things and stuff. Thank you, Emily. We're trying over here. Girl, are you back? Where'd she go? I just need to change the slide. Thank you. I see you moving. That there's a couple of things that you
sounds good.
About. Yeah. That there's a couple of things that you have to think about when it comes to, okay, girl, we hear you. You changed the slide and unmuted yourself. There's a couple of things that you have to think about. So with your mindset, and this is one to me that I think people don't talk about enough, but this is this idea of scarcity versus abundance leads really clearly into the kind of leader that you want to be. We align this conversation a lot with youth development as a whole. So for most of you, if I met you all on the street and somebody asked me who you were and what you did, I would call you a youth development practitioner, or I would call you a community educator, right? And part of being a youth development practitioner is that you have learned to use the asset lens when it comes to looking at young people. We don't look at young people as broken. We don't look at young people as something that we have to fix. We look at young people as whole and beautiful and complete as they are. And then we look at, but then how do we resource them up so that that's a little different, right? So thinking about that, there's two things that we frame this through. So you can look at the scarcity mindset, or you can look at the abundance mindset. I'm going to give folks a couple of seconds to read this on this slide. So with reading this, tell me what comes up for folks. You can either put stuff in the chat or come on the mic. Acting as a giver, contributing to others' well-being, growth versus fixed mindset. It's a big deal. And I'm going to ask something. Does anyone know what that means? What Ms. Huntington just put in the chat? I didn't see any thumbs because I think that's important. No clue what that means. Okay. So one of the things about, and there's some other really powerful work that we support around growth heart set as well as growth mindset. Things to hold, y'all, is that you ever walked into a situation and someone said something and you were like, no, I know that that's not right. And you are 100% sure that it is, there's no way that that could be what you thinking is wrong. Like you're like, no, whatever you just said, I know that that's not the right thing. And there's no other way for you to think about that. And then you realize that, well, that person had a completely different lived experience. That person experienced that thing very differently. So their kind of take on it was really different from yours. That ability to think about the fact that there is always another possibility of something aligns with the idea of a growth mindset. The idea that things don't always have to be what other people say or what other people held. What do you want to add to that? Because girl, I know that you have done more than enough work on this. I can't do that versus I can do this in order to try to achieve that. It's just being mindful that you have the possibility. Like the fact that no is not always the only answer. Like we have a, in our team, there's a lot of things that people don't think or never thought that we would be able to do. But a lot of our framing is that, well, maybe not right now, but that's definitely a possibility, right? So living in the power of yet, I think, is a beautiful way to kind of say that succinctly. Let's see. Things won't change. It is what it is versus how or what can we change. A great add-on. The fact that, y'all, if we live in the world of possibility, and think about it, like our young people live in some pretty specific circumstances. And there's a phrase, the whole that a rose can grow in the concrete because anything really is possible. And if we work with our young people to look and live through the lens of possibility, it changes things for them. Another way to say that is give people hope. When people think that there is an opportunity for things to be different, they can then be different. But if you never believe that they can be, you don't even try. You don't even do the work that could get you closer to that idea of yes and or yet, right? What else do we have up here? Embracing flexibility and adaptability. Anybody else? What things stuck out for you and looking at this kind of pessimistic versus optimistic thinking? What else kind of showed up for you? And the question is, and remember how I said before that I'm not saying that anything is a right or a wrong. It just really can be how you have experienced the world to this point. Because the truth is, a lot of us came through places in our lives where pessimism may have kept us safe. So moving into this space of optimism is different. And so how do you really hold that? What'd you say, Brazil? Provide challenges that prove that optimism is valuable. What does that mean to you, Brazil? So that means you're going to have to actually say something. Thank you.
Yes, before I was locked up, so I apologize. I was going to say, finding some kind of challenges where optimism is needed and giving that as a task and watching them succeed. And I think that it proves it in a different way than just constantly talking, about or trying to push like growth mindset and using all of these different language pieces that, it may be professional terms, but our staff may not necessarily even be there yet. And so sometimes just giving them a challenge that they don't know how to solve, that forces them to look and be, a little more optimistic, or at least you can kind of reframe it when you're reflecting on it to show them that it required optimism to be able to even, attempt the project. So those kinds of, like, just being deliberate about creating things that require that skill set.
I agree. And the thing is, thinking about that, Brazil, like thinking about the team. So you all, Brazil works in Berkeley, and Brazil has evolved from a site-based leader to a leader in her district space. And what were some of the things that you felt, Brazil, honestly, were hardest for you to transition from being a site coordinator to a district level leadership? Because you were then asked to support your people that were your colleagues and your peers differently. What was some of the things that you had to pay attention to when that happened?
I think for me, one of the biggest things was, which you'll probably find on TikTok or Facebook daily, but that you can't necessarily go into something expecting even your peers that, or former peers that you were doing the same work. You can't assume that people are getting the job done in the same way or at the same level that you may have been doing it. And so I think for me, I didn't realize as I was on my site that I was really doing a lot of this high level work without really knowing that it was even high level work that I was doing. I was just trying to solve problems that were kind of impeding progress. And so then to become to move up and to sort of see things from a higher plane, so to speak, it kind of really let me know, like, oh, like growth mindset is something that's a huge big deal. Because if I'm saying, oh, you can just make a spreadsheet for this, and they're like, well, why? Or I don't want to do that, or I don't have a computer, or I don't use my phone, or whatever the excuse is. It's like, but we do have computers, we do have phones, we have all these things. I'm sorry, there's background airplanes. But so to really just challenge them in ways that you may have not realized they needed to be challenged in. Maybe that's how I would say that. So that's one of the things that I really noticed that there were just some things that I figured like everybody knows that they need to do attendance because that's how we get paid. But to assume, I think assumptions are just killers of all kinds of things. So I think to not assume and to really offer that growth mindset, not to be judgmental. It's like, to say, hey, I don't care that you've been working here 20 years and you don't know that we need attendance done. Like, now we need attendance done. I need you to see that these are the reasons why, and this is how it impacts not only, you fussing about supplies, but it also impacts like how many students we can serve, and just all of the things. So yeah, I don't know if that answered any of your question, but
it did. But and y'all, let me unpack something that I thought was important about what Brazil said. Is that so when you think about this, like once you're in ratio with young people, right? You're at 1 to 20. So your main focus is keeping them safe, keeping them engaged, and keeping them doing the stuff that you want them to do in front of them, right? Hoping they have a good time. But it really is like, it's hard to look down the road when you have to keep looking down to make sure what you're supposed to be taking care of is important. As the leader, what you look at has to shift. You don't have as much luxury to always look down. That's someone else's work. You now have to look out and look forward and see, well, what are the other things that are happening? What are the things that are keeping my people from being successful? What are the things that are making it where our young people are not showing up the way we want them to? Like, what are the things that we need to do? And so then it becomes more about, oh, well, I can't be in everyone's class to manage how they're managing young people, but I can do a training so that I can level set the whole group around, well, here's the expectations, right? Like, being a leader means that you have to look at the bigger picture and think about the greater good while using the individual experiences to kind of level that conversation up. I think, let's see, I saw somebody else put something, focusing on relationships and lead with trust. Y'all, it is important. And I think I said it kind of in passing earlier, is that we say in CAN that the work that we do with the field moves at the speed of trust. If people do not trust you, they do not listen to you. They are usually resistant to work with you, right? And it's like, we all know that we can get more accomplished as a collective. And so if that really is our truth, then building trusting and meaningful relationships is how we really make that happen. And I'm really thinking about the comment earlier with the, like, that they had a leader that was there for 20 years. And it's like, how do you come behind that? And the truth is, you come behind it one truth, one experience at a time with that team. And it doesn't happen overnight. But the more you can build a relationship with them over doing the things that you say you were going to do, and when you can't, you come to the team and you are honest about that. And you say, this is what I thought I was going to be able to do. I wasn't able to for these reasons. When you can share. That's the other part, is as a leader, sometimes you don't get to tell everybody everything. Right? You don't always get to do that, but you do get to say to people, there are things that we can't control, but here's what we can control. So what do we want to do as a collective with that? Equipping ourselves to be able to shift the scarcity mindset when we are witnessing it. Yeah, that's critical. I think it's Letitia. And part of what that feels like to folks is being able to call it when you see it. You know, a lot of times we just say, oh my gosh, she is so negative. Like, every time she's in a room, all she got is something bad to say. But the truth is, that could just be how, and a lot of times when people are like that, it's for safety reasons. And so you have to start unpacking, well, why don't you feel safe enough in this space to be positive and think through the possibility of something? Like, how do you really do that? Comparison versus self-improvement. Interesting. Anna, what else? What did that mean for you? And you can type it in if you don't want to come off the mic.
Yeah. And let me.
Oh, but you did. There we go. I hear you.
Okay, so I'll put my camera back on. I'm just looking at the pessimistic thinking compared to the optimistic thinking, and I'm just thinking there's always maybe a barrier, kind of like what you were discussing, or a comparison instead of the optimistic thinking is more of how can I improve? What can I do differently? How can I use this as an opportunity? So when I'm looking at both, I'm thinking of comparison to others or not understanding, or I think the example that you gave about someone coming in negative or not feeling safe to optimistic thinking is feeling safe and looking at how to improve and how to embrace ideas. So that's kind of what I was thinking, comparison versus self-improvement.
Yeah, I love that. And I, it's funny. One of the few things that's an ed code about any expanded learning program is that everybody has to participate in some type of continuous quality improvement, right? And one of the reasons why, when Michael fought for that, when the director of the division fought for that, was what he wanted to create. He said, I just want every program to acknowledge that every day they are working to be the very best version of themselves that day, right? And what that means is if we constantly hold that idea of self-improvement, that will be happening in our programs, right? It doesn't ever mean that someone didn't do a good job today, but what we're saying is, can you do a better one tomorrow? Like, we can acknowledge our good while still acknowledging that, and we can always still keep trying because our young people deserve that, right? And I think that's the important piece. And I love the idea, like you said, that sometimes when people, when we're in more of a scarcity mindset, we are always comparing ourselves to what someone else did, what someone else has, right? How they are, what they get to do, what they have access to. When the truth is, the more we focus internally on us and show up as our very best selves, our own things open up for us that are possible. Let's see. Emily said, do you have any recommendations for how to respond to the individual that is consistently in that negative space? I'm a cusser, so it probably would come out wrong. But the reality is you have to be able to call that out to people when you see it. Now, it doesn't mean that you say, oh, that you're super negative. And I will use, our team we've had experience with this because we work across the entire state. And so lots of systems. And normally what I try to do for folks is, we call it doing a little bit of mirror work for them, right? Like, when someone shows up in a place, you don't have to say, why are you showing up in such a shitty attitude all the time? Like, you don't have to say that. But what you can say is, we're at choice how we show up in the rooms. And if you've had a challenging day, here's what I would love for my team to do. Let us know that you've had a challenging day so we can give you a few minutes for you to go do a little bit so you can come into the room differently. I anchor you all so much in how people show up for young people. And I feel like the young people that we serve in expanded learning, they are always the most disenfranchised. They are always the most marginalized. They are always the children that are most impacted by all of the under-resourced places on this planet. I promise you, right? And what they deserve of us is the best of us in the space. But that means that we have to take responsibility for how we're showing up in the rooms. And if we're working on teams that are actually really trying to be teams and not just people that work at the same place, then I expect you to hold me accountable to a shared expectation that we have, that when I come in the room, I'm giving my best to the room. Now, That doesn't mean that every day is a good day, but it does mean that as my colleague, you get to look at me and say, Tiff, it looks like you're having a bit of a day. You need a minute? And I get to say, yup, I need a minute. I'm gonna have to go get myself together. And then I promise when I come back in, right? But that also means that to be able to have that level of dialogue, the leader in the space has created that kind of community where we actually see each other and we call each other on stuff like that. And that doesn't happen overnight. Y'all keep hearing me say that. Like, I think that is so important in this, that these things take time to do, but I do believe that when you act like if there's an elephant in the room, that phrase, like when people show up and they're always in a bad mood and no one ever says anything, and then we all start walking on eggshells like around them, you know, the person who gets impacted the most, everybody else. That person, they keep moving on with their life. They keep showing up the way they show up. And the truth is, it impacts how everyone else does their work. So if we can create space where we get to say, you know what, this isn't okay for us. As a collective, this is how we need everybody to show up. And if that's not how you're willing to show up, you may also learn that that may not be the place that you need to work, because that may be the best thing for you and for us as a collective. So yeah, it's not easy, but yeah. And then the other part is, like I said, I also get to the place with staff when I say shit like, you can't keep coming to work acting like this every day. It's not good for you, it's not good for us, and it's not good for kids. So now I'm not saying everybody has to say that, but just saying, sometimes it comes to that. Anything else, y'all? We got about 5 minutes. And so I put a link in here that leads to, it's another site that has some different explorations and pros and cons of different types of leadership. I'm also going to add in a slide about the ORID. And so that when we make this deck available for you, it won't have the title of this workshop because that was not what this was. This is something that was a conversation that we just ended up having, but you will all still be able to have access to it. What I like about what's in this deck, though, is it has some other ways for you all to think about like how to really elevate compassion as a leader, but then also how to really pay attention to how you show up and how people then translate what that means to them. There's the last slide. Girl, can you go to 22? And this will be quick, and then we'll let y'all go. And then y'all get to go back to the main space. So last part about it. I'm sorry, go back one more, girl. Go to the ladder. Sorry, for whatever reason, the slides are off from mine to yours. So what this ladder signifies is kind of how we end up showing up and engaging with people in the world. It's a lot of words to basically say that the way that we show up and the things that we think, and this goes to that fixed mindset stuff for real, is there's data that we all hold, the things that help us make the decisions that we make all the time. And some of those things, we don't even think about them anymore. They're just ingrained in who we are, how we think, what we believe. And that's just the data that we experience. Like we always say, when you look around the room, think about where you are right now. Stop what you're doing and just look around the room. And now I want you to close your eyes and then open them again and look around the room more slowly. And you'll notice that you saw more things, because our brain can only take in so much information at one time because it's always picking up so much. But what really sticks are the things that reinforce what we already saw. So like if you're in your office, you'll notice the first things that you like the most and don't like the most about your office. But it'll be hard for you to notice those little bitty things that are just in there. But the truth is, all of those things, when someone asks you about your office, you would be like, oh yeah, my office has this in it. And then someone else would go in there and be like, oh, but there was this and this and this. And you'd be like, oh yeah, I didn't pay that any attention. That's what that is. But I want you all to think about that as a leader and as you show up in the world, there are things that have made you who you are. And in that, and how you have conversations with other people and how you respond to things as a leader, is you take the data that you pull in and then you kind of filter that out and you select the data and you add meaning to that data. And then once you add meaning to that data, it allows you to make certain assumptions. It allows you to come and jump to certain conclusions. And then that's reinforced, and it reinforces what you already believe. And then you take actions and you say and you do things. That's why I was saying the part earlier in this conversation about when you are working with people, you can't always assume that they know why you did something, and you can't always assume that you understand why they did something. As a leader, the biggest gift you can give people is your curiosity to ask, to honestly be in relationship with people enough to say, I wonder what's really going on here, and let's really talk through that, and not assume that someone did something because they were angry at you or because they didn't like someone. Sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with it. But if we don't give people enough space to actually say what's going on for them, we as a leader can make things worse, because there's a lot of power with being the leader in a space. So thank you, y'all, for sticking with us. We appreciate it, right? We're going to send folks back to, y'all are going to the main room, right, Gro? Yes, Heather said in the background.
Yep.
Yes.
You have a transition break.
How long do they have?
Transition break until, and then at 1:35,
Yep.
back to the plenary.
You got 5 minutes, y'all, and then you get to go back to the plenary. So please don't look at the screen for 5 minutes. Get some water, walk around. If you can, get a little sunshine, right? All of that. And we will see y'all back in the main room. Again, y'all, thank you for your grace and for having a conversation with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Tiffany, for stepping in. Just really appreciate it. And yes, like you said, thanks for everyone's patience.
Yeah.
You just got to roll with it sometimes. So thank you, Tiffany.
Of course.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, you guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you, Grove, for holding us down. Dee was trying to get on.
Yeah, I don't know. He was trying to use the link from the previous one. But Tiffany, thank you. Oh my gosh. I'm like, what am I supposed to say? We started out before you joined. I was asking people, I'm like, any good nuggets to share from your first session? Like what can we talk about?
I know. It's just, and I don't, and we didn't know that he wasn't showing up. We didn't know. So
yeah. And I knew that Melissa and crew were trying to track him down. So, but great discussion. Like there's some really great stuff going on. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it is. Of course. All right, girl. I will see you on the other side. I mean, I probably could just walk outside and see you, but I'll see you.
All right.
In the other room. Okay. Bye.
Thanks all. I'm going to close the room.